It is built on equality that exists before identity is imposed, and that is precisely why it is so threatening to the world they inhabit. Harrenhal is a ruin not just of stone, but of meaning. It is a place where power has already failed once, spectacularly. The castle stands as a warning. Dominance rots, conquest decays, and names carved too loudly into history eventually collapse under their own weight.
1 million men could have marched on these walls, and 1 million men would have been repelled. But an attack from the air with dragon fire.
Into this spacewalk 2 children who on paper could not be more different. One a highborn girl in hiding, the other a blacksmith's apprentice conscripted into war. But the brilliance of their interaction is that none of that is allowed to matter yet. Arya Stark does not meet Gendry as a lady. She meets him as another body trying to survive. This is not accidental. Arya's entire psychology is structured around resistance to imposed roles. From the beginning, she chafes against hierarchy not because she lacks understanding of it, but because she perceives it as arbitrary. Lords are not wiser, knights are not braver, girls are not weaker. These distinctions, to Arya, are stories adults tell to justify power. Harrenhal strips those stories bare. Under Lannister occupation, titles do not protect you. They mark you for consumption. Arya's hatred of hierarchy is therefore not ideological, it is empirical. She has watched the world reward cruelty and punish honesty. She has learned painfully that being someone important makes you vulnerable, not safe. Her instinct is to flatten herself, to erase markers of status. Arya is not just a disguise, it is an assertion. I am no one. Treat me as such. Gendry, by contrast, does not erase his identity because he does not yet know it. He moves through the world with the unexamined posture of someone born to authority but never told. He is physically imposing, skilled, bluntly moral. He bristles at injustice instinctively, not strategically.
We're not really people to you, are we? Just a million different ways to get what you want.
When he talks back to soldiers or questions orders, it is not rebellion, it is confusion. Why should one man be allowed to brutalize another simply because of rank? This is what makes him an unconscious noble, not his blood, but his expectations. He assumes fairness because, on some level, fairness has always been his birthright, even if he has never been allowed to claim it. Their bond forms in this narrow space where neither fully understands who they are supposed to be. Arya is a noble pretending to be nothing. Gendry is nothing pretending to be content. In that overlap, equality becomes possible. Notice how they speak to each other. There is no deference, no flirtation built on aspiration, no power imbalance to negotiate. Arya challenges Gendry openly. Gendry pushes back without condescension. When they argue, it is not about status, it is about values, fairness, loyalty, anger, survival. This is critical. Trust in Game of Thrones rarely emerges from shared ideals. It usually emerges from mutual utility. Arya and Gendry are different. Their trust is built on recognition. They see each other clearly because neither is performing. At Harrenhal, performance is death. The castle is a factory of false obedience. Men pretend loyalty to survive. Servants pretend ignorance. Everyone lies downward and fears upward. Arya's survival depends on reading these performances and rejecting them internally. Gendry, less subtle, simply refuses to internalize them at all. He does not kneel emotionally, even when forced to kneel physically. Their equality, then, is not naive. It is defiant. Arya does not look at Gendry and see a bastard, a commoner, or a future knight. She sees someone who does not treat her as an object to be managed. Gendry does not look at Arya and see a girl to be protected or commanded. He sees competence, rage, humor sharpened by pain. The moment he learns she is a girl does not rupture this bond, it clarifies it.
My name's not Arya. It's Arya of House Stark.
Gender, like class, fails to reorganize their relationship because it arrives too late. Trust has already been established on equal footing. Identity is an overlay, not a foundation. This sequence is quietly radical within the moral economy of the series. In Westeros, Identity usually precedes relationship. You are someone first, then you are treated accordingly. Arya and Gendry invert this. They relate first, then identity intrudes and fails to dominate. Harrenhal itself reinforces this inversion. As a seat of absolute power reduced to haunted utility, it mirrors what happens when identity outlives legitimacy. The castle's grandeur cannot protect its inhabitants from cruelty. In fact, it amplifies it. The Lannisters occupy Harrenhal not as rulers, but as parasites wearing the skin of authority. In this environment, Arya and Gendry's mutual recognition becomes an act of resistance. They are human to each other in a place designed to erase humanity. Arya's natural aversion to hierarchy sharpens here into something more durable, an ethics of action. She does not oppose power in theory, she opposes power that cannot justify itself. Gendry's labor ethic, his insistence that work matters more than words, aligns with this instinctively. He judges people by what they do, not what they claim. That is why he clashes with knights and soldiers alike. Their authority is performative, his competence is real. This alignment is fragile, but it is pure. It exists only because neither has yet been fully claimed by their lineage. Once Arya's name reasserts itself, once Gendry's bloodline becomes known, the moment. It matters that this bond forms before revelation. Had Arya met Gendry as Arya Stark, the interaction would have been contaminated by deference, curiosity, or resentment. Had Gendry known his parentage, his self-concept would already be warped by proximity to power. Their equality is contingent, temporary, and therefore precious. This is why it leaves such a lasting imprint on both of them. Arya will spend the rest of her life seeking relationships that replicate this feeling, where she is not reduced to symbol or weapon. Gendry will carry an unarticulated expectation becomes voluntary. The tragedy is that Westeros cannot sustain such spaces. Harrenhal allows it only because it is broken. Functional systems reassert hierarchy immediately. Broken systems accidentally permit equality, but only briefly. Arya and Gendry do not change the world at Harrenhal. They are changed by it. They learn that who you are can matter less than how you treat someone, if, and only if, identity has not yet been weaponized. That lesson will not make them safer. It will make them lonelier. Because once you have known equality before identity, every other relationship feels compromised. And that is the quiet power of this scene. It does not argue that hierarchy is evil. It shows that hierarchy is unnecessary for connection and therefore exposed as optional, artificial, and deeply fragile. Two people meet, no titles, no ancestry, no future claims, just trust, forged before the world could interfere. What deepens the significance of this encounter is how completely it exists outside the logic of reward. Arya and Gendry do not help each other because they expect safety, elevation, or future allegiance. There is no imagined payoff. Their cooperation is inefficient by Westeros's standards. It costs effort, risk, and emotional exposure without offering leverage, and that is precisely why it feels authentic. Most relationships in this world are transactional long before they are personal. Even affection is often strategic. Parents love children because they extend legacy. Lords protect bannermen because loyalty compounds power. But Arya and Gendry's bond resists instrumentalization. They share food, they share labor, they share fear. None of these exchanges consolidate advantage. They merely sustain dignity. This matters because dignity is the rarest currency at Harrenhal. The castle's function under Lannister occupation is not simply to extract labor or enforce obedience, but to grind individuality down into compliance. People are not meant to trust one another there. Suspicion is safer. Silence is safer. Emotional detachment is safer. Arya and Gendry violate all three instincts. They speak freely. They challenge each other. They allow irritation and concern to surface. In a place designed to erase interior life, they insist on having one. This insistence is not heroic. It is stubborn. And that stubbornness reveals something essential about both characters. Neither is interested in becoming less human to survive. Arya adapts tactically. She lies, conceals, calculates, but she does not internalize the logic of domination. Gendry adapts physically. He works, endures, complies, but he does not surrender moral expectation. Together, they form a temporary counterculture of two. The scene also quietly interrogates masculinity and femininity without naming either. Gendry's strength is not framed as protection, and Arya's competence is not framed as exception. There is no moment where he must rescue her to affirm himself, nor a moment where she must reject help to affirm independence. Assistance flows situationally. Whoever is better positioned acts. Power is contextual, not fixed. This fluidity is radical in a narrative environment obsessed with roles. Knights must protect, ladies must endure, bastards must resent. Arya and Gendry ignore these scripts, not because they are in fiction. That functional authenticity becomes the basis for their mutual respect. Gendry respects Arya because she works as hard as anyone else, because she refuses to beg, because she confronts danger without melodrama. Arya respects Gendry because he does not posture, because he speaks plainly, because he treats cruelty as a violation rather than a feature of authority. Neither admiration is romanticized, it is earned incrementally. This is why the later revelation of identity feels like contamination rather than enrichment. When Arya's name eventually matters again, it brings with it expectations, obligations, and symbolic weight. When Gendry's bloodline is revealed, it recontextualizes his strength as inheritance rather than effort. The world retroactively rewrites them. Harrenhal becomes a lost control sample, a version of themselves untainted by narrative. That loss is crucial. It introduces a subtle grief that neither character fully articulates. Arya will become exceptional, feared, mythologized. Gendry will be elevated, legitimized, instrumentalized. But neither future will replicate the simplicity of being seen without interpretation. The scene, therefore, operates as a critique of identity itself, not as something false, but as something corrosive when it precedes relationship. Names compress people into symbols. Symbols invite projection. Projection invites exploitation. Harrenhal briefly suspends that chain. Two people encounter each other without the burden of meaning, and meaning follows rather than dictates. This has lasting psychological consequences. Arya's later rejection of aristocratic femininity, her discomfort with reverence, and her preference for anonymity are not only reactions to trauma, they are attempts to return to this earlier equilibrium. She is most at ease when no one knows who she is, because anonymity restores relational honesty. Gendry's later frustration with knighthood and lordship mirrors this. Titles do not fulfill him because they do not explain his worth. They obscure it. His sense of self was forged in labor and mutual recognition, not in ceremony. When he is finally offered legitimacy, it feels abstract, less real than a shared meal in a burned-out castle. Harrenhal collapses constantly. Its scale mocks authority. Its decay mocks permanence. In such a space, inherited identity loses coherence. What remains are actions, reactions, choices under pressure. Arya and Gendry recognize each other precisely because neither is protected by abstraction. This is why their bond resonates long after the scene ends. It represents a version of social order that Westeros cannot sustain, but cannot fully erase. A world where trust is not negotiated through rank, where identity follows interaction rather than precedes it, where equality is not declared but practiced instinctively. Arya and Gendry do not articulate this philosophy. They live it briefly, under duress, without language, and that may be the most honest form it can take, because the moment it is named, the world would find a way to weaponize it. At Harrenhal, it remains unnamed, and that is why it survives.